I want to welcome everyone to today's events, our full-day really conference on human rights and justice for all. We have several sessions on nonviolence, on ways to get involved, youth activism. We're also going to show a trailer from a film where we had house showings as a form of resistance and activism, the film No Other Land. So this is exciting. If you are watching online on BeMagazine.org, or if you want to see a replay of any of this, if you can't stay for the whole day, then please you can go to BeMagazine.org or BeMagazine's YouTube link and see this conference. It will be there always. I want to thank you all for being here. First, I'd like to invite Judith Peterson Ben up to give a welcome for the Unitarian Church. Judith Peterson Ben and her husband, Dave Ben, created this social justice outreach protest group called Standing Out Chattanooga, and it is the longest running activism protest group in Chattanooga, almost a decade. So I'm just so honored that they are my friends, that the Unitarian Church is hosting this on location here in this beautiful space that recognizes all faiths, all people, all walks. So this is Judith Peterson Ben.
Welcome, and thank you for coming today. As Missy said, I head up the Social Justice Committee here at church, and we are amazed at you all asking to use our church, and we're so grateful. We like to open our church to folks who have issues such as the kind that we're going to be talking about today. So if you ever have an event that you would like to have hosted, just let us know. They'll send it over to me and we'll make it happen. So thank you all for coming, and a big welcome from the Unitarian Universalists.
Thank you, Judith. And thank you all again for being here. I know we've got so many friends and people that came in from out of town. Anthony Aguilar came in. He's going to be speaking to us later. He flew in today. Tomorrow, he's going to be going to the Netherlands to testify at The Hague because he has witnessed the violence that's happening in Gaza and Palestine. So part of what we're doing here today is to network, to understand that we are a broad community that cares about these issues. We care about human rights. We care about people. And we just need to lift our voices and amplify our work. Go on social media, so if you have some breaks, take photos, look around the room, meet people, talk to people. You are not alone. We are not alone, and we must not be silent. In 2017, I had an opportunity to be in Palestine, went in from Jerusalem to Bethlehem and then into South Hebron, where I witnessed settler violence. I have seen this. I am a witness. Once you see this, once you understand what's happening, you can't turn around. You cannot turn your backs, and we refuse to be silent. One of the things that we need to understand is the history of Palestine, because we have been fed one story, one narrative, but there is a bigger, much deeper, much more important narrative that includes everything. And I am honored to bring on Professor Emeritus from UTC, Dr. Moughrabi, to tell this story and to share the real history of Palestine. Dr. Moughrabi.
Do I use this? Well, thank you very much, Miss. I'm happy to be here today, and I feel at home in this church. I don't usually feel at home in any church, but somehow I feel at ease in this church. You know, I'm not foolish enough to think I can tell you the history of the place for the last 100 years. So I'm going to put on my professorial hat, although I'm retired, and suggest some things for you to read. There are three authors that I think are fundamental for any historical reading or awareness of what's going on in Palestine. The first and the most important is Rashid Khalidi's 100-Year War on Palestine. Rashid is a friend of mine. We worked together for many years. He just retired from Columbia, and he was totally distressed at what Columbia, that a place that he loved and devoted much of his life to service in, has experienced. He has other works, but this is probably his most significant work in terms of giving you a very Palestinian perspective on the last 100 years. The second is an Israeli friend of mine, a friend of ours, Ilan Pappé, P-A-P-P-E, and his book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. Ilan has written other things as well, but in terms of an accurate historical narrative, this is probably his most important work. And the third author that I strongly recommend to you all is Edward Said. Edward was a good friend and a colleague, and we worked for many years together on a lot of things. His book, The Question of Palestine, is a succinct, important definition of the conflict. And his book, Orientalism, which has been translated into maybe 20 different languages, is a revolutionary interpretation of how the West frames things, issues dealing with non-Western things like Palestine. And the third book is Culture and Imperialism, also by Edward Said. So I would strongly recommend that you read at least some of them. And if you want to read only one, I would recommend Rashid Khalidi's work. I was born in a small village west of Jerusalem called Ain Karim. It has become part of the municipality, the expanded municipality of Jerusalem. But I was born there in 1942. And the village is the home of John the Baptist, for those of you who bother to read the Bible. Beautiful village, one of the most beautiful, in my opinion, of all the Palestinian villages. It remains much as it was when we left. We were forced to leave in 1948. And it's an artist colony. Liberal Jews have settled there. When you run into people, I gave a lecture once at Hebrew University, and one of the members of the audience came up to me and thanked me and we were chatting a little bit about what I was talking about. And I said, where do you live? She said, I live in Ain Karim. I said, oh, that's my home. She said, well, I'm sorry, it's mine now. I said, oh, good. Well, in any case, so I recall I was about 6 years old, a little less than 6, in 48, but I have vivid memories of our leaving in the middle of the night and walking for a long distance. Things that I would think of later in later years was, how did my mother and my grandmother manage to feed a bunch of kids and to keep them from going hungry as we were walking for days? And I developed a sudden overwhelming respect for these women because they were the greatest foragers that I've ever known. And they were farm ladies, farming community, But their attachment to the land and their knowledge of the landscape is so incredibly close that you can't really. They're organically linked to the land and to its vegetables and its fruits and its landscape and its plants and and so they were able to do that and to keep kids from starving for days. And it's interesting because the process by which we were forced to leave. The guy comes, one of the young men who was guarding on the outskirts of the village with old muskets. They were no match for the Israeli Zionist forces, gangs that were coming to attack. And he came running through the village in the middle of the night, say, the Jews are coming, save yourself. And the thing that years later, you reflect about these things, and I think, for me, I begin to attach names. I find names that are appropriate to describe what happened to us. Settler-colonialism is one known, and then you realize this all started way back in the 19th century. It's a settler-colonial project. It's similar to other settler projects, like the American one, or the Canadian, or Australian, and so on, South African, but different in one respect, very important respect. This was an exclusively Jewish, nationalist, Zionist project. And that means it has no tolerance for anybody other than Jews within that polity that they were creating. So the idea for them, the problem for them was, always the presence of non-Jews, Palestinians, natives. How do you deal with that? And there was a debate, at various times. You could go back and read, for example, what Ahad Ha'am said, or perhaps the best of these guys was Judah Magnus, who became president of Hebrew University, and his writings, and he was a firm believer that the best solution is a binational one, where everybody is equal, has equal rights. So there was that crowd, and then there was the other crowd that said, no, we have to get rid of them. It's just, we can't have any natives here. They're nomads, they're Bedouins, they're easily, they can transfer to other places. And no. So that wing, that school of thought prevailed. And interestingly, later on, years later, somebody like Benny Morris, for example, who is a revisionist historian and a good historian, who talked about how the refugees came about and tried to dispel the myths about the refugees. They were not people who were left on their own accord or were told to leave by the invading Arab armies and so on, that they were forced to leave because of ethnic cleansing. But later on, in an interview, he would say things like, Ben Gurion was wrong. He didn't finish the job. And our problem is that Ben Gurion failed to finish the job. In other words, to complete the job of ethnic cleansing and getting rid of the native population. So you have settler-colonial regime project. That's one. The second one is, the movement, the march in the middle of the night, going towards an area from Ein Kerem towards, in the direction of Bethlehem, where we ended up. I come to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I discover something called the Trail of Tears. So that's our Trail of Tears. So, Palestine is not something outrageously foreign. It is critical to know what happened in Palestine because Palestine has become a global metaphor. This is how Elias Suleiman, our filmmaker, in an interview defined it. It's a global metaphor. And when you see things happening in the United States, well, they send the army in the cities to practice on how to fight urban warfare. Well, the Israelis are experts at that, and I'm sure they've been training our police for quite some time on how to do that. So Palestine, if you talk about justice, equality, human rights, and so on, this young man is going to be going to the Netherlands to talk about human rights. If we really did have human rights system that is active and functioning, you wouldn't have this problem going on. But Gaza has exposed the weaknesses of the liberal order that we have established since the Second World War and the human rights order that we also established. Everything, and you think, I'm liberal, I'm against this and that, I'm for this, except when it comes to Palestine. Somehow Palestine is excluded from the order of humanity. I remember one time years ago, the university hired a biology professor, happened to be Jewish. He was a good biologist. But every time I wrote something or said something on TV in an interview, his wife would nag him to death. You have to respond to him. You have to respond. She was like one of the settler ladies. And he begged me one time, a couple of times, please try to control yourself because this is making my life miserable. But in any case, one day I'm walking in the university center to go to lunch with some colleagues, and I see her talking to people. So she gets up and walks towards me, and she says, "Professor, I want you to know something. It's not what you say that bothers me. It's not what you write that bothers me. It's your existence bothers me." I said, wow. And that was a revelation, because I realized that, for them, we as human beings are the problem. We're the obstacle in front of their project. Gaza happens because there was a conjunction of circumstances that in both a movement within Israel towards the extreme right, a movement in the United States towards the extreme right, and elsewhere as well in Western Europe. So there's the circumstances were ripe for the extreme right wing in Israel to try to finish the job, of ethnic cleansing. But I don't think they expected the kind of resistance and resilience that they faced in Gaza or in the West Bank, which is also being under systematic attack. We resist. We resist in a variety of ways. And when we make love to our wives and make children, that's an act of resistance for us. When we celebrate circumcision or a wedding, whatever, that's an act of resistance. A woman wearing her thobe with the tatrees, which is typical of different villages, have different patterns. My mother's wedding dress, for example, my wife has it now, and all the women in the village contributed to that. They would work on small pieces and then they put it all together. So it's a communal project. So that becomes an act of resistance as well. So we resist, and we will continue to resist, and we will continue to live, and I think eventually we will prevail. But we're not interested in killing Jews. We're not interested in throwing them in the sea. We're not interested in any of this. Some things, violent things happen because the circumstances are such and that decisions are made by politicians here and there that force people, and I don't want to rationalize it or explain it or justify it, but it is a matter of fact that these things do happen. But our resistance in many ways, in hundreds of little ways, is passive and civil and very, very peaceful kind of resistance. And I think for us to have, or for you, for people like you, to make your voice heard is extremely important. For you to when you go to Costco and see they are selling Israeli couscous, to go to the customer relations desk and complain about that. That this is stealing some native. There is no such thing as Israeli couscous and Israeli hummus and Israeli falafel and so on and so forth. To make yourself heard, to make whatever little acts of resistance in boycotting something, for example, that's extremely important. It's very significant. So I leave you with the notion that we are all in this together. We have to continue to resist. We have to continue to speak out. We have to continue to be informed in an era where information and facts are distorted and filtered, and they spend lots of money and lots of time to try to distort things. But the fact is that what happened in Gaza has created a seismic shift in international and world public opinion. So you're not alone. You're part of millions of people out there who now see what is happening very clearly. And it's only a matter of time before public opinion, the shift in public opinion will lead to shifts in public policy. They haven't so far, a little bit, they have done a little bit in this country, but they will if we persist. So thank you very much.
Dr. Moughrabi will be part of our big panel later on today, so he'll be sharing more. We're so grateful for him. And we'll have Q&A at the end of that. Just FYI, the youth panel is going to be coming up next. So the questions will be later, but I have a question that I want to ask right now to Dr. Moughrabi, and that is something that we hear on a daily basis so many times during the day. I'm just like, what is going on? Because from my understanding, Semitic peoples are Palestinian peoples as well. So when you hear the hate directed at Palestinians, to me, that's anti-Semitism. So I would love for Dr. Moughrabi to explain this, so these terms that get co-opted by one group or another, that we understand that Palestinians and Jews are both Semitic people. Is this correct?
Yes, we are. Look, there's no question, there's absolutely no question that anti-Semitism is a horrible thing. There's no question about that. It's like racism and Islamophobia and on and on and on. These are horrible things, and we have to fight against it. But the fact of the matter is that they have used anti-Semitism as a tool, as a weapon, and that is sad. And a lot of Jews are very disturbed about that. Many of my Jewish friends are very upset about this. And then you find Jewish Voice for Peace and so on, and others are also very upset about that. You know, it's devaluing what anti-Semitism has been and is. So that's one part of it. The second part is we're all Semites there. You know, you can do a genetic structure, but it's just, it has nothing to do with genes and so on. It really is it's a deliberate project to steal land, basically, to control land, to take, and you know, and it has created such a mindset among these people that is outrageous. I mean, that is really incredible. You know, I don't want to get to talk in detail about this, but I think it's sad. It's very sad. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, Dr. Moughrabi, we'll be back later. Indy, Dr. Moughrabi's wife, is absolutely wonderful. They are a team, and I would love for Indy to stand up and let everyone just see her beautiful self and the partner to our fabulous Dr. Moughrabi. Indy, thank you. They are a team. Fearless women, and we're going to be hearing from a lot of fearless women later on, including Medea Benjamin, co-founder of Code Pink, Women of Peace, and Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb, who is with Jewish Voice for Peace. And these women and men here are on the front lines of fighting for peace and justice. But let me just take a moment to say that we are not the story. We are not the story. We may be freedom fighters and justice warriors for peace around the globe, but the real heroes, the true heroes, are those living in Gaza and in places like this that are withstanding this kind of violence and terror on an hourly basis, watching their children be blown up and shot in deliberate killings like the IDF targets. One day it may be targeting the genitals of young men. Another day it may be something else, and this kind of torture has become a game. What has happened to our humanity? So today we call upon justice warriors, peace fighters, freedom fighters to join together to speak out and remember that our true heroes are those on the ground, and that existence is resistance. Existence is resistance as we stand and speak for these people, as we stand up and speak truth to power, as we live. We are the resistance.